Communities and changing lives. The Urban League has been there to serve when our community is at its lowest. It's never mattered what the crisis was. The systemic oppression remains constant for those most vulnerable. Here at the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we'll be temporarily adjusting our hours of operation and available services. If you are in need of resources, we recommend that you give us a call at 206-461-3792. To make an appointment, press 0 and speak with the receptionist. Walk-in hours will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And hey, we'll gladly work with you via phone as best as we can if you're exhibiting any signs of illness to assist you with information to save your home, find you a place to sleep, or connect you to job opportunities. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. That's 206-461-3792. Rainier Avenue Radio presents All Music, All Day Saturday. Music, All Day Saturday.
This is Edwin Bailey, Bulldog Blue.
Jazz from the Cabinets.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy.
Star Time.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul Pierce.
This is Star Time.
Saturdays, all music, all day. Reggae Hour. K-Fox Night.
Looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the box.
Fresh Juice with D-Money in there.
Myself, D-Money. Nice Ice Patrol.
Taylor Hart.
Existencia. The Northwest Rap Game.
DJ Medina. Chad Cheddar. Northwest Rap Game.
Sergio Lacour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone line. Tell them who we talking.
Sea Monster Radio. Mo Jams. It's your jam.
We're live. Welcome to Mojo Mondays. This is KZ of KZ Music Media. Caller Goddess for Mojo Mondays.
Just my opinion. God is inspiration. All day and all night. Saturdays on RainierAvenueRadio.org. Your creative work might look a little different this year, but For Culture grants can still help you put your ideas in motion and share them with King County. Check this out. For Culture is now offering grants in 3 disciplines: art, heritage, and historic preservation. Apply by April 28th. For more information, go to forculture.org. Brought to you by For Culture. As a cultural funding agency for King County, For Culture works to make our region vibrant.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not using my GPS to navigate the land of 1,000 dances, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
All right. And is my mic doing all right? Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So welcome everyone to our discussion on the first day of Earth Deserves More Than a Day. Now we are going to be talking about climate change. What's our problem? I am here with environmental justice advocates whom we will share their insights on this topic. I'm happy to be a part of this collaborative production with Rainier Avenue Radio World, Social Justice Film Institute, and Front and Centered. Again, my name is Aurora Martin. I'm the co-director of Community Capacity Building, and with me today are Jill Mangaliman, whom you heard from earlier as the executive director of Got Green, and Hannah Lidstrom of the Sunrise Movement in Seattle. Let's quickly go around and do some introductions of who's with me today to talk a little bit more about what your work is about and your position before we dive into the questions. Before we get to Jill, I'm going to start first with Hannah Lidstrom. Hannah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do and your organization? Oh, well, we just dropped. She just dropped off, but she's going to be joining us. Jill, let's get back to you. For some of the folks who were not able to hear your radio show talk just a few minutes ago, why don't we have you do a quick introduction and a little bit again about your organization before you start teaching us about climate change. Jill?
Hi everyone. I just managed to grab some lunch real quick, some sinigang. So hungry.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'll make
sinigang
it,
bread.
Jill.
I'm Jill Mangaliman. I use they them pronouns. I'm a Filipina, a queer person, born and raised in Seattle. I now live in Burien, 5 minutes from the airport. So I went from a place with highways out, freeway outside my window to a place with also freeways nearby and airports. So, things just keep happening to me. I am the executive director at Got Green, like I said. Been involved with the organization since 2009. We were founded in 2008. And yeah, Got Green, we're a people of color led environmental justice organization based in South Beacon Hill. Actually, we serve communities, low income communities of color from South Seattle and also King County. Our big issues are around access to healthy food, living wage green jobs, reliable transit, climate resilience, and also addressing the displacement issue. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks so much, Jill. From one Filipina to another, now I'm going to make sinigang for dinner tonight. Anyway, Hannah has been able to join us again on the internet. Hannah, welcome back. And if you could just introduce yourself a little bit about what you do, who you are, your background, and the work that you are doing with your organization to combat climate change. Hannah? Hi, Hannah. Is your audio okay?
Hello. Just first of all,
There you go. Oh,
my internet is being really weird.
oh, that audio is
Okay,
great.
awesome. So, hello. I am Hannah. Okay, sorry. Can people hear me?
Yes. Yes. Can you hear us?
Sorry. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Can people hear me?
Yeah, Hannah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Pretty clear.
This is going to be a meme, okay? This is all improvisational. Hannah, we can hear you, okay? And until you start talking, I'm
Okay.
just going to. Okay, good.
Awesome. Sorry, everything is being weird. Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, so my name is Hannah Lindell Smith. I think I'm gonna have to keep my camera off for now.
Oh, we're experiencing a bit of a delay. And while that gets worked out, maybe I'm just going to lodge into some questions about climate change to get our conversation started, Jill. Because much of the listenership and audience may be just, learning about what do we really mean by climate change. It is a very common, it's a common warning. And a lot of people, I think, are eager to learn about it. A lot of people are eager to debate about it. And a lot of people are incredibly passionate about it, like you. So why don't we start with the basics, though, and have you break down what is climate change and what is our problem? Jill?
Boy, oh boy. Yes. So, yeah, we've talked great lengths about climate change and why, we don't want it to be like some sort of thing that's far away because it is already happening. And just to let you know, like I always think about how, we have Earth, right? And there is the ozone layer, or I like to think about it like this blanket covering the Earth. And for hundreds of years, I think I want to like throw it back to, the Industrial Revolution when we started burning fossil fuels more. Hand it back. At a higher rate, when there started to be factories and cars and so forth, there started being more pollution, release more gas, into the air. What we're experiencing now, there's a bit of a 50-year lapse. We did this exercise in Got Green. We learned from Movement Generation that the climate that we're experiencing now is emitted from the pollution that was caused 50 years ago in the 70s. Can you imagine what it will be like 50 years from now, if we're still around, right? And so that's just one point to that, up in the atmosphere, it's capturing all of this pollution, all of this carbon, and we're just feeling the effects now from 50 years ago. The UN actually has been talking about this for years. People have been warning us about it for many, many years. This is what is happening because of the type of economy we have, this dig, dump, burn economy. And there's been scientists and people warning us about it. But unfortunately, including our own country, the United States, has been very adamant, no, we can't scale back. We got to keep growing our economies. We got to keep burning things. We got to keep putting out more highways and putting out more cars because it's about money, right? So there's been loud voices coming from environmental justice communities, climate justice advocates, indigenous communities around the world have been showing up to, these international spaces, demanding action. Even countries in the global south has been like, hey, our islands are underwater. I saw firsthand in my homeland, the Philippines, the impacts of typhoons. I went there in 2013, around the time of Typhoon Haiyan, and just saw, villages completely swept away from the flash floods after a typhoon. And, just to let you know, the typhoons are normal, rainy season's normal, but because of climate change, they were extremely worse. And then you add on large scale mining and large scale logging, and there's nothing in the ground to protect the villages from the flash floods. And so we're seeing extreme weather events, we're seeing these signs. We got to remember that these are not made up. They're actually man-made, or rather corporation-made. If we hadn't harmed Mother Earth for so many years, we wouldn't be in this predicament. And so we really do need to shift the type of economy we got. We got to stop. We got to stop dig, dumping, burning in the communities. We got to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and to shift this course. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jill. I'm going to pick up on that that theme that you were just talking about with regard to essentially what I am hearing is the fever pitch, literally, of the planet and what is happening on a global level and on a local level. Before I dig into those questions, why don't we actually go back to Hannah, who is on the phone. And Hannah, you can introduce yourself and the work that you're doing with the Sunrise Movement.
Okay, so hello. Now that's working a little bit better. Sorry about all of that.
That's okay.
So my name is Hannah, and I am 14 years old. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a youth organizer with the Sunrise Movement, specifically Sunrise Seattle. And this is one of my first years, I guess, of doing activism-y legislative stuff, but it's been kind of an amazing ride, if a little bit hectic. And I guess, would you just like to hear a little bit more about some of the stuff Sunrise Seattle has been doing on.
Yeah, feel free to let us know. I think it's incredibly important for you to be able to share about the fact that this is about your generation. It is an intergenerational problem that we are facing, but I think it's incredibly important to be hearing from the youth. And so anything you want to bring about sharing with regard to youth movements and the Sunrise movement, that would be a welcome voice to hear.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I have been so involved in climate justice activism, is because I know that this is going to affect me and my generation. And I think one of my, like, when people like to ask what my why moment was, when, like, if there was one moment when I realized that I really cared about climate justice, and for me, I guess one of the moments when that really hit me was during the wildfires last summer, and there was smoke completely covering the city. I couldn't breathe outside. None of us could. We could not see a block away. It was really terrifying. And I was texting my cousin in Portland, making sure that her and her kids were okay. And she said, "When the world is not pre-apocalyptic, come visit us on the train, Hannah." And I texted back to them, "I'll try to make the world not pre-apocalyptic so that I can come visit you." And I think that was one of the, like, big moments where I was kind of just realized, okay, this is really going to affect everyone. This is going to affect me, and I don't want to be growing up in a world where I can't breathe every summer because of the smoke in the air. And I don't want my little cousins and everybody to have to grow up in that kind of world either. So that was why I joined the Sunrise movement, is and it definitely has not been all, like, awesome and amazing, but it really was. It was so amazing to be around other people, other young people who cared, who really, like, felt the same like I did. And not just young people. This is super intergenerational. Met a bunch of awesome people like Jill, like, yeah, just everyone. And yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. That was a really, when you were describing what it was like last summer, and many of us were having to, or most of us were having to actually stay home as a result of the pandemic. It was you painted a memory, I think, for a lot of us, when we haven't actually lived through something like this before. And Jill, when you actually started talking about the basics of what climate change is, you talk about it as, in my mind anyway, as a bit of a fever pitch that is we're blanketed with the ozone layer and it's just getting hotter and hotter. And the impact of climate change on a global level, on a national level, and on a local level. You started to paint the picture of your travels to the Philippines and it being an island country, being representative, of course, of island nations, essentially being the first and the worst hit. And so I wanted to actually go even deeper. If you could imagine the sort of lens focusing in on your communities, if you can actually talk a bit more about how it is that you are seeing climate change affecting your particular neighborhood, and the ways in which you are having to engage as a community organization or as a group of other young people within the Sunrise movement nationally. Hannah, what are some concrete ways in which you're starting to see this particular dot here in Seattle, Washington, or South King County is connected to the Philippines, is connected to Vanuatu, is connected to all these places? Jill, can you talk a little bit more about it? Last segment, we heard a bit about the impact on farm workers, for example, and heat-related illness and all of that. And maybe you can paint a picture even more about some current things you're seeing in your neighborhood.
Yeah, right on. So a major thing is definitely around the health and the wellness of our folks, especially BIPOC communities living in Seattle or even surrounding, because we know that the rising costs have been putting people further away from the city core. And like after having years and years of exposure to pollution, now you tack on these extreme weather events such as heat waves, and now the fire smoke from wildfire season, which we are also preparing to get ready for. Unfortunately, this is something that just happens every year now, where our people are, can't go outside because of the thickness of the smoke. And so, when you have a community that's been exposed to pollution for so long and have high rates of asthma, and then you throw on, the climate impacts, that only makes it worse or exasperates it. We have the opportunity to, connect with our communities, offering up filters, but we know that's not enough, right? Like many of our housing infrastructure in our neighborhoods are older houses and doesn't have like air conditioning, and so when it's hot, our people want to go outside. They also want to save energy, so they think, oh, I'm going to go outside. And so there's just major barriers for our people to deal with the extreme weather events. Another example is around the cost of food. Already, folks live in food deserts or already have shared with us that the cost of food is, especially healthy food, is out of reach, and so the need for to address the food issue has been something that Got Green has been really focused on. Even with COVID, we've been ensuring that people have access to fresh bucks or even emergency food vouchers. A lot of people don't know this, but Seattle has one of the most expensive groceries in all of the nation, and that only is because our food sources as well are affected by climate change, right? Like how the costs are going to go up as there are more famines, there are more again weather events, um, and so needing to start. Even we're starting to do more gardening and thinking about how do we support local food systems, which also connects to our relationship to farm workers as well, our rural workers. Like, how do we ensure that where our food is coming from is local, but also the people who are picking our food are not being exploited, and how do we have solidarity with them? We heard it was 2 years ago when there was a farm worker who died in a heat wave, and we sent some folks to be in solidarity with them as they were striking and demanding for justice. No one should die being out in the fields. That's inhumane and undignified. The one last thing I'll add is around displacement. We know that the rising costs of housing has been an issue, and a lot of our community members are being pushed further and further away from their community social safety nets, and into places that are also not safe either, like flood zones, away from resources, away from just having the needs met when there are emergencies. And so that's something Got Green is working on with our partners. How do we ensure resiliency and our people are thriving when there is when not just when things are difficult, but when also at the everyday life. um,
That's great. Thank you, Jill. I know that we are going to have to go into a commercial break in about 5 minutes. And so in that time, I'd love to hear you say a little bit more, Hannah, about how you and the Sunrise Movement in the Seattle area are seeing climate change manifest.
Yeah, so I think that Seattle has a lot more privilege than many cities as like overall, and to not necessarily have to deal with the very first and worst effects of the climate crisis. But I think that there's still a lot of communities, even within the city, that are just that are definitely going to get hit harder, just because of the demographics of the city. I remember noticing that this is really just when I was playing soccer in middle school, that all of the, this is maybe not a great analogy, but that all of the best teams would be from the richest neighborhoods, like North Seattle. And I think that's kind of true with the effects of the climate crisis too. Maybe that wasn't a great analogy, but you can kind of, the climate crisis is going to affect all of us, but there are definitely communities that are going to get hit harder and hit first, and already are. For instance, right now that there's like residents of Dalridge or South Park, which are in West Seattle, where I live, are, I think, the life expectancy for one of those neighborhoods is, I believe, 8 years less than Seattle on average. And if that's true, imagine like how much less is it for North Seattle. And like as Jill mentioned, a lot of that is from environmental racism, because that is always where the highways are, the refineries are, the steel plants are, the airports are, all the pollutants are. And this is actually something I've come up with a lot during the legislative session. All of this environmental racism, how these polluting facilities always get put next to the lower income and communities of color.
What do you mean by that, Hannah? What do you mean by that, in terms of something that you've come up with a lot in the legislative session about location of industry in lower income communities of color, just at least in the last 2 minutes before we break?
So one of the big ways that's been visible is right now there is a cap and trade bill that is currently going through the House that I have, and Scott Green has been working a lot on this too, with, and it is, if this was passed, this would implement a cap and trade program in Washington State, and this has been a method that's proven to, so this bill is being it's being introduced as climate justice policy, but it is a method that has been proven many times, especially in California, to enforce environmental racism by letting communities pollute where it's cheapest to pollute, which is near communities. So I guess that's just near communities of color and low-income communities. And I think that is just a really kind of sad like illustration of how some areas and just overall some lives are seen as less valuable than others. I'm
gonna have you hold that thought, Hannah. I'm gonna have you hold that thought, because we're gonna go into a commercial break, and when we return, we're gonna pick up, but we're also gonna lift up, because there are things that we are gonna be doing to make sure that that is not the case.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world, celebrating 4 years of broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in the interest of South Seattle and surrounding communities. Hey, it's Tony B, and yes, I'm excited to share with you that April 1st is our birthday. This one is our fourth of amplifying the diverse voices in our communities, broadcasting community events, providing award-winning instructional classes to youth and adults, supporting our music communities in all genres and forms, hosting critical conversations, and making sure that we are who you are. 2020 provided us with the opportunities to meet the needs of our communities. Rainier Avenue Radio is proud to have provided our communities with the most comprehensive coverage of how the coronavirus did and continues to impact our communities. And so, for our birthday, on behalf of our amazing staff, volunteers, and show hosts, to all of our contributors, supporters, listeners, and viewers, thank you. Thank you for your support and patience while we were trying to figure out this internet and broadcasting media thing 4 years ago. Thank you to our youth students who took our courses in interdisciplinaries like communication, journalism, multimedia, math and coding, adult digital literacy, social media analytics, beat making, film, photography, and of course, broadcast. Thank you for staying with us even when we made mistakes. You know that when we provide opportunities for you to share your voice, thoughts, issues, concerns, and talents, then we look at that as growing together. As the African proverb says, that is how we will go far. We have grown, and you've grown with us. We have over 80 shows hosted or produced by members of our communities. And all of this during a pandemic. But that is one reason why we do exist. As a true grassroots organization that started out broadcasting out of a study room in the Columbia City Library, we formed alliances with groups like the HCAACD, worked with city government, private developers, and a variety of arts organizations to promote sustainable art space, land acquisition, and ownership for arts organizations. I'm sure many were shocked when we leased 3 properties in the heart of Columbia City, providing our community members with business opportunities for a hair salon, barbershop, recording studio, rental hall, youth concert and celebration space, artist residency, and an art gallery, among the other multiple uses. We are continuing that growth as we move towards ownership of property in the Central District and in land acquisition in South Seattle's Columbia City to preserve the historical and cultural artistic integrity of our communities and ensure that independent voices continue to be heard. So for those of you who have found out about us recently, we thank you on our birthday for allowing us to broadcast our community-created content however and wherever you listen and watch. If you'd like to make a birthday donation to Rainier Avenue Radio, it would be much appreciated. Yes, times are tough, so any amount would be greatly appreciated. You will see the results. Here's how you can donate. You can go to our website at rainieravenueradio.world and go to the donate page. You can Venmo at Rainier Avenue Radio. You can send a check to Rainier Avenue Radio, P.O. Box 18774, Seattle, Washington, 98118. You can donate to Shunpipe, which is our fiscal agent. Just indicate that your contribution is for Rainier Avenue Radio. Shunpipe is the 501c3 nonprofit agency that provides independent art groups like ours in Washington State services, resources, and opportunities. Once again, happy birthday to us at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We are your community radio station. We will continue to provide you with community-created content, broadcast live from our communities, and of course, we'll bring you high school sports like nobody else can. Join us in celebration. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
All right, we're back, and thank you. Thank you again to the Rainier Avenue Radio World team of Tony and Karen and Daniel, who have been so gracious and supportive and adaptive to all of our technical challenges. And I am grateful also to be collaborating and coordinating with Social Justice Film Institute and, of course, Front and Centered. So we're back again talking with Hannah Lidstrom of the Sunrise Movement Seattle and Executive Director Jill Mangaliman of Got Green. Hannah, you were talking about this legislative advocacy session, and we just had a wrap up actually of some of the legislative advocates who were on air just an hour before our session. But you started to talk about and kind of build upon Jill's point too of having grown up around what we are calling fence line communities, communities that are located along industrial, more polluted, hotter spots. I did want to put out there for our listenership the fact that if you want to learn a bit more about all of the stuff that we're talking about, certainly go to the Front and Centered website. You'll be able to not only read a lot about the different issues we're talking about today and throughout the week, but also very specifically this relatively new tool, the Environmental Health Disparities Map, actually lays out the kind of geographic hotspots in Washington state. It has served and most polluted spots in Washington state. That really spotlights this very issue of climate change and the intersectional issues of racial justice and environmental justice. Between Jill and Hannah, I want to ask you a bit more about how fence line communities, when we talk about fence line communities, give us the top 5 or top 10, whatever that list is, top 5, top 3, top 10 lists of what is a fence line community? What does that mean in the context of environmental and racial justice? Jill, do you want to start?
Yeah. I mean, it's basically you're living. I mean, if you can just imagine living right outside your window is the highway, is the factory. Just like Hannah said, like these polluted industry are these sources of pollution are placed in the areas that are lower income, working class, immigrant, people of color, indigenous, Black and brown, and yeah, these areas are where if you look at a map from the 1930s of Seattle. There's this map that actually shows where all the hazardous spots are. It's red. And you line that up with the map, even today, of where, people of color or all the industries are, they match, like these are not by accident land use laws. Like these are actual, like that's how they decided redlining. Like let's put these industries next to places where poor folks live or people of color live, and yeah, it the justification is it's for the greater good. Like we got to put this somewhere. Unfortunately, for communities like mine, it's we grow up with it. We have to endure it every day, to the point where we don't even realize it. Like I think one of the things that we do at Got Green, we have, when it's not COVID, we're having our annual retreats where we go out in the woods and have our planning and our sessions together and by Mount Rainier. And it was a big thing because folks are like, this is what clean air smells like. This is what we've been missing out on, and it's eye-opening because we're so used to having highways and factories and airports outside our window. So used to, living, like having soot on our cars, or getting headaches or having asthma that, it just kind of comes along with living next to these places. And it's not like we can just up and move easily. Like we've been told, like, oh, why don't you just move? If anyone knows how difficult it is to buy a house or to find a place to live in a quote unquote like healthy neighborhood, like it's difficult, and that's what we're fighting for. We're hoping that we want everyone to be able to experience a healthy community, healthy environment. We don't want anyone to suffer like our people have suffered.
All right. Well, thank you, Jill. What about you, Hannah? Do you want to help describe what we mean by frontline and fence line communities in terms of the climate change and pollution impacts?
Yeah, what Jill said, pretty much. I guess, yeah. I think to me, frontline communities frontline communities are the communities that have been repeatedly throughout history been valued as less, have been handed off the worst effects of racism, COVID, the climate, and now the climate crisis. And just the communities that are seen as sacrificable. I don't know if that's a word or not, but yeah. And that's kind of what we're seeing over and over, is the attitude of it has to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so we are going to put it here, near these communities that are seen as less than. And that is communities of color, Black, brown, indigenous communities, immigrant, poor, queer, woman, everyone who is already, all of the people who are already marginalized in society. And the climate crisis is just building on top of that.
You know, when you say that, I also feel the need to, we're focused here in Seattle, but we've had some folks from the last session give a perspective as well on the rural perspective, and to drive home the point that it's not just an urban issue, but it is really a urban and rural and global issue. I did, you know, as you were talking there, Hannah, it made me think about the work that I've done and just, you know, working with a statewide organization before, and the outreach or the visits and the meetings that I would do across the state in rural parts of Washington. And definitely the work that I've done together with on certain programs with farm worker youth or farm worker students. I remember the way they described how climate change showed up for them was that they had to adjust their work days. Especially now as we're entering the harvest season here in Washington State, the way in which they would talk about how when times were hotter, to avoid heat-related illness or heat stroke that a number of farm workers have had to experience, they would essentially have to do 2 shifts to adapt to cooler and perhaps even darker times, darker physically, that is, in the sense that that's how they would have to adapt their lives to hotter climates so that they can effectively and safely harvest the fruit. And so these were some of the things that they were starting to describe about, well, you know, we can adapt, but is, you know, waking up instead of 4 o'clock in the morning, we'll have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, stop a shift and then go back in maybe early evening. Another thing that I felt that was kind of remarkably, I guess, similar, whether you're in an urban or a rural environment, is respiratory illness and life expectancy. It seems as if when people are able to go to and check out the environmental health disparities map, I think what is so amazing about that particular map is that it takes the stories and creates the massive data and visualization about these cumulative impacts, so to speak, that we're talking about, the cumulative impacts of pollution, of heat, of other toxics that are around, and then that matches as well about the concentrations of communities and the demographics of communities. And both of you are absolutely right in being able to identify the fact that what the Washington Environmental Health Disparities Map demonstrates is that these cumulative impacts on a large scale data level demonstrate and confirm the fact that frontline communities who are predominantly people of color have lower life expectancies. Why? Because of issues of higher rates of concentrated pollution. And when the heat is rising as a result of climate change, it increases that pressure on that level, on the different neighborhoods. And when you can imagine it with farm workers, and I can imagine it in the places that you have described, Jill, of places that you've grown up, I can imagine it along the Duwamish River in the West Seattle area that you've described, Hannah. And so with that, it's not as if we needed a map necessarily to justify or to provide the evidence that is to the stories, but it makes it that much more powerful, even because we know that through your two stories, there are probably 200,000 more stories or 2 million more stories. So I want to know, though, as we're talking about bearing witness to the problems of climate change and the sense of urgency that is definitely intergenerational, what's one concrete thing that each of you would recommend for the audience that is just kind of feeling and sharing that sense of urgency as a result of our conversation today? What is your recommendation for one thing that they should do today?
Yeah, so I guess as a sunrise person, I'm tempted to be like, join the sunrise movement. But yeah, no, that's I think a really good thing. I think actually like feeling the urgency is a really good first step that kind of gives you like it gives you what you need to like you understand the relevancy, you understand why we can't have this continue, and now you want to do something. That's kind of, I think, one of the hardest places to be. That's the place I was for a lot of last fall, actually. But I think one thing that you can do, I think one of the most important things that you can do is just to educate yourself a little bit more, actually. And that's going to give you kind of the tools and the resources and the knowledge you mean to stand up for your communities. And like once you've done that, I think that's a really, I think once you've done that, you can do anything. If you know all about, if you've done, if you have your story and then you have those, if you have your story and then you have the stories that other people have told through data, through articles, through anything, if you have your story and all of those collective stories, then you can really change things. That's really a really powerful place to be in. Maybe that's not very specific. But I guess that would be my thing. Yeah.
That's great. Jill?
Yeah, I was thinking of the same lines as Hannah, like, it's two-part, but I agree, like, definitely educating ourselves around but more importantly, like, what are the root causes of climate change? Like, how is this happening? Because we don't want to solve the problem with the problem that caused it, right? Like with more market systems, like the way we're like this is because of the type of economy we've had at this dig, burn, dump, fossil fuel, exploitive economy. We can't solve the problems with the same solutions from that economy. And so really digging into learning about climate justice and just transition and, what caused climate change, right? But to hold all that information will be really heavy. And so I would say the next step would be to organize, to get together with your community, because you're going to need that community collective support to help channel all of that, all that energy, all that rage, all that sadness and grief, has to be translated into action. We can't just do this by ourselves. It's going to take collective action to, keep fossil fuels in the ground, to change the course of our economy so that we can actually have a future. So organize.
Right on, Jill. Right on. Well, I did want to actually pick up on that because in the last 5 minutes or so of our time together, I wanted to share a bit more and building upon both of your insights that as a student, I feel of the environmental justice work and climate justice work that we're all involved in, I feel like some of the most hopeful and innovative and really interesting things that are going on is, in addition to the bearing witness of sharing these stories and getting educated and getting activated, is that we've been able, as a coalition, together with all kinds of really amazing partnerships with other NGOs and even the university and research places like at the University of Washington, we've been able to work with the stories and connect and bridge these opportunities to inform policy. So when people think about what are the gaps between policy and practice, I think one of the really interesting things that I've seen, and both of you have already touched on in terms of legislative action, is we need something between community action and policy, and making it so that there can really be a shift. And I think the environmental health disparities map, for example, which undergirds the recently passed, out of both houses anyway, Healthy Environment for All Act. It's such an amazing example of how that at a high level of policy is going to try to effectuate the environmental justice solutions that that both of you and other environmental justice advocates have actually pointed out that needs to happen. And the process in which the the Healthy Environment for All Act actually went through was also a pretty amazing thing, in that it demonstrates yet another way, another concrete example of how policy and practice come together. And that is that front and center, together with a number of coalition members and key partners throughout the state, went and conducted through the Environmental Justice Task Force of the state, these community listening sessions, and sat and listened to at least a couple of hundred people to actually just listen and learn. What are the environmental justice issues that people are seeing? What are some of the solutions locally that need to happen? What are some concerns? What are some fears? And what are some hopes? And I think through this sort of engagement of conversation, as well as stories, that again then translated and was layered over the environmental health disparities map, which identified where are the hottest spots in Washington state. They are the Superfund sites in South King County and along the Duwamish Valley, as well as in the Pierce County area, and not surprisingly in the heart of Washington, where much of agricultural workers are also concentrated. There is a high rate of issues of lower expectancy of life, as well as respiratory disease, and of course pollution and climate change issues. And so on top of that, what was born, I think, was the coming together of different tools and realizing that it's more than just one thing. I think Jill and Hannah, when you talk about the fact that there are issues of housing affordability and issues of just quality of air, and therefore quality of ability to go from one place to another, and what does that mean? Hannah, you talked about the different your observation about the different sports programs and how much more resources and how greener they may be able to, or how much they may be able to practice in greener neighborhoods and therefore not have to deal with asthma. That's why I think the Healthy Environment for All Act actually demonstrates the fact that it's more than just one agency's responsibility. And it's more than just one particular group's responsibility. We have to shift all of our behaviors and connect the dots. I know that I've been kind of like filling in a lot of air here, but I'm actually sort of responding to the fact that through the stories and the commentaries that you have both shared, there is still the need to balance that kind of hope of putting policy and practice together. Jill and Hannah, do you want to mention maybe maybe one other policy that you would like to see as a bold solution. I know, Jill, you have actually been involved in the local Green New Deal Act, which addresses and tries to address the issue of a just transition in terms of labor and housing, as well as other shifts that we need to make. Jill?
No, we definitely need to have a Green New Deal locally in Seattle. We were able to pass a resolution in 2019, and the resolution laid out a vision to, decarbonize Seattle by 2030, and to help, households move away from using fossil fuels and creating green jobs. We have yet to see implementation. Unfortunately, we had the pandemic. But something that got Green is especially interested in when we implement the Green New Deal, how do we address the historical environmental injustices that these frontline communities have experienced for years? And so how can they be prioritized in the transition and not be left out? And, how about our own version of a HEAL Act locally? Or how do we ensure that, that the fence line communities are well supported, resourced. Like one example, right? When they're electrifying buses, why not prioritize the communities that have the most pollution, like ours, like EJ spots, so that we can have less pollution. So just even that prioritization, that acknowledgement that we need to ensure there's justice in our policies, in implementation, and how do we better the conditions. And lastly, how do we also prevent displacement? We don't want to greenwash our neighborhoods either. We don't want to push out our people, so that we actually want them to, benefit from the victories. And so we want to make sure that our communities are rooted in place, and whatever green policy or Green New Deal we have has anti-displacement in it.
Great. Wow, those are bold solutions. Bold solutions, Jill. Hannah, in the last few minutes of our time, is there a dream policy that you would like to see, or even a set of new practices that people can undertake to address the issue of climate change?
Yeah, I don't know. So as a Sunrise person, I'm also I'm a Green New Deal nerd. That would be my dream policy, I guess. I think that the fact that we got a Green New Deal resolution passed in Seattle in 2019 was absolutely amazing, and now we have to actually make that work and stick by it. And I think that is the main policy that Sunrise advocates for and fights for. And I think that that's because it would be an amazing policy. And so that's kind of my dream policy for the state, for the city, for the country, for just everywhere. And one policy I think right now that Sunrise is working on at the national level is the Good Jobs for All pledge, which doesn't maybe directly relate to the climate crisis, but is a very, very intersectional piece of legislation that addresses a lot of different issues. And I'm pretty excited about that one. And so yeah, that would be
great.
One.
Well, those are some bold policies and exciting solutions that you all are engaged in. I want to thank you both for joining me today. I want to urge everyone else, our listenership, to actually keep track of the different shows that are happening today and throughout the next 2 days. We are very excited to have continued conversation, sharing of stories, and also screening of films. I did want to put out there the fact that the Promised Land film will have to be made on demand. I'm working with a filmmaker to actually put it on a separate Eventbrite link. Also wanted to say that we still will have some other films related to the Duwamish block of issues at that time. So check back, and I want to thank both of you, Hannah and Jill, and thank the Rainier Avenue Radio World for having us on live. There's more programming. Check the websites. Join us later. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.